Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Coaching Skills for Your Managers and Leaders. My name is Jessica. I'm on the marketing team with BizLibrary, and I'll be the host for today's session. Before we get started, I want to go through just a couple of housekeeping items. First, what you should see on your screen. On the left-hand side of the screen, this is the webinar viewer. So this is where you'll see the content that we're sharing with you today. On the right-hand side of the screen, this is the control panel. So this is where you can join the audio portion of today's webinar, and you can also communicate with us through the question box. The default mode for the control panel is for it to collapse. If you want to open the control panel back up, simply click the orange box with the white arrow in it, and it'll expand for you. All of today's attendees are in listen-only mode. You can join the audio portion of today's webinar either through the teleconference line, and you can also listen through your speakers. If you're going to listen through your speakers, I recommend either using a pair of headphones or a headset to get the best audio quality. We like to keep things pretty informal, so if you have any questions or discussion points, feel free to send them over through the question box that's located within the control panel. I like to weave the questions in as it relates to what we're discussing in the webinar, and then I'll also leave some time at the end for Q&A. I am recording the session today, so I'll make a link to the webinar recording as well as the slides and follow-up information available after today's session. So that'll be up on our blog at bizlibrary.com/bizblog. You can also download the slides for today. I put a link to them in the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. You should have also received a link to the slides in the reminder email that you received this morning. Today's session is approved for 1 hour CE credit for all of you HR professionals attending. I'll make a link to the completion certificate available at the end of today's webinar, and I'll also send out a link to the completion certificate in the follow-up email that you'll receive within 24 hours. Again, my name is Jessica. I'm on the marketing team with BizLibrary. Graduated from the University of Missouri-Columbia with a degree in journalism. Been working in the training and development industry now for about 5 years. I'm very active in social media, so I tweet on behalf of BizLibrary at BizLibrary and also at my own account at Jessel Petrie. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn, so I like to share a lot of articles and discussions around human resources, learning and development, and marketing. So if you're on either of those social networks, would love it if you'd reach out and connect. Presenting with us today is Chris Osborne. Chris is the VP of Marketing for BizLibrary. He's also worked in a consulting capacity with a Paris-based leadership development consulting firm where he helped organizations design and implement leadership and executive development programs. He's been performing learning development and training functions formally since 2000 and informally for organizations since 1987. Prior to Chris's move into the business sector, he practiced law in the areas of labor, employment, and business litigation for over 12 years. He graduated from WashU School of Law with honors in 1987. Chris is also active in social media, so you can find him on Twitter at Chris Osborne STL. You can also find him on LinkedIn, so I'm sure you'd love it if you reach out and connect as well. Just to give you a little bit of background on BizLibrary, BizLibrary is a leading provider of online employee training and e-learning solutions. The award-winning content library contains more than 7,000 online employee training videos covering every business training topic, so things like communication skills, leadership and management, sales and customer service, compliance training, safety, desktop computer skills, and more. Additionally, BizLibrary's LMS or Learning Management System and social learning technology platform help HR and learning leaders improve and manage employee learning. All right, so enough about us. I have 2 poll questions to kick things off for today. So you should see the poll pop up on your screen in just a minute. So first one is, how would you describe your manager training and development? Is it A, ad hoc at best, B, reactionary, C, foundational but nothing ongoing, D, plans are outlined but they're not necessarily aligned to the business goals, or E, strategic and continuous?
Hey Jessica, how you doing?
Hey Chris, I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Excited about today's webinar.
Good. It's a topic area that you're pretty passionate about, so it's always a fun webinar to present. It's one of our newer ones. There's also a companion ebook for this, so I'll actually put that link in the chat panel if you want to download the ebook that goes with it. It has more details on it, but a fun topic for sure.
Yes, it is. Yeah, Jessica mentioned it's one of our newer ones. I think this is the 2nd edition of this webinar, so welcome everybody. We are really appreciative of you coming. I'm watching these poll results come in here too. This is interesting. Yeah, I really am fascinated by what I'm seeing here. So I think we've got some ideas and best practices and some suggestions that I think everybody can take away today.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and close it out, share the results with everyone. So it looks like we've got 35% said reactionary, 25% said foundational, but nothing ongoing, 22%
I don't see the poll results yet.
Oh, sorry.
There we go. Thank you.
There you go. 35% reactionary, 25% foundational, 22% ad hoc, 11% said strategic and continuous, and 7% plans are outlined but not necessarily aligned to organizational goals.
Yeah, and I don't think this is an unusual mix for organizations. You know, if we sat down and really talk carefully to companies or organizations that are working with managers in this area, I think a broader cross-section of a business population, it wouldn't deviate very much from these results at all. More than half of the folks here today are, you know, doing what they can when they can, essentially, don't really have a plan. 25% provide some help, but nothing ongoing, and then we have a couple of other groups, cohorts here that are in a little bit better shape. But like I said, I think we've got something interesting for everyone today.
Yeah, so one more quick poll question. What is your manager's biggest challenge when coaching employees? Is it A, building the relationship, B, identifying performance gaps, C, asking questions and problem solving, D, supporting and encouraging, or E, driving results?
Yeah, it's the biggest challenge. We recognize that all of these are pretty important challenges, and it's probably, for most of us, it would be a blend of these. I know my own challenges over the course of my professional career as a manager have in various ways encompassed all of these challenges. But what's the biggest one? What's the biggest one that you run into? I'm not surprised at what's leading the way here, though. Interesting poll results. Just so you know, as you are participating in the poll, Jessica and I watch the results change on our screens, and it's actually really fun to watch. People dive right in and give us the quick answers and sort of how the results build as more people participate.
It's almost as exciting as American Idol when they do the text the results. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know if anyone even watches.
More exciting.
I don't know that anyone watches American Idol anymore. But anyways. All right, I'll go ahead and close it out. We've got, let's see. All right, 31% said driving results, 21% asking questions and problem solving, 20% identifying performance gaps, 15% building the relationship, and 13% supporting and encouraging.
I am not in any way surprised at this. I figured we'd have a closer mix of these results than the poll prior. And if you step back and think about it, most of us, not everybody, but most of us get into management and supervision largely because we are motivated to help people. We're kind of wired to build relationships. Now, that's obviously a big challenge for some organizations, but I'm not surprised that doesn't rank as the biggest one. I am not at all surprised that driving results is number one, and it requires all of these pieces to do. It's the most complex outcome required. So I'm not surprised at this at all. This is very, very, very good stuff. Thank you all so much for
Chris, we lost your audio for a minute, I think.
Oh, am I back yet?
Yeah, you're back. All right, so we have
I'm sorry about that.
4 high-level things that we're going to cover today, or at least Chris is going to review them at a high level. So go ahead and pass the ball over to you, Chris, and we'll keep going.
All right. Let me get to the right slide. That would always be helpful, wouldn't it? If we can start in the right place. And hopefully you see the what we'll cover slide. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're good to go.
All right, super. Well, thank you all again for attending. As Jessica mentioned, this is a topic that I am very passionate about. I've done a lot of coaching over the course of my career, executive coaching all the way to the sort of coaching that I continue to do on a daily basis with the team that I lead here. And I wish I could tell you that what I've learned is that there is a set methodology to do it, but there's not. but I have learned that it's extremely important. And we've got some data that proves that. I always believe that intuitively, but some research is emerging, has been recently published, that really proves it. And it's wonderful to see. The next three pieces are really going to be built largely upon some best practices, thought leadership that we've found, and some experiences that both Jessica and I have had. But I want to talk to you about how to adapt coaching and leadership styles. The best coaches do this really well, and we want to talk to you about how that works. And then we're going to give you a sense of the three foundational elements that we look for in successful coaches. And once we go through those, I'm going to, we won't pause much, but I will ask you to think through the most successful coaches you've worked with over the course of your career or observed, and I'd be willing to bet you're going to find those elements there. And we're going to talk about the coaching models that are out there. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on this part of the webinar, actually, but the models are fascinating, and they're very helpful in some ways and a little bit limiting in others, and we'll get to an explanation of both aspects of the models when we get there. One of the things that I wanted to start with is to give you a sense of the diversity of approaches and personalities from the sports world. Great coaches that we have observed and can think about and learn from. But you've got John Wooden. He was the NCAA champion 10 times or in 12 seasons, including 7 in a row at UCLA, regarded as the greatest college basketball coach of all time. And he says, ability is the poor man's wealth. But he was really great at motivating through a very calm, simple approach to success with a strong emphasis on execution and fundamentals. So that's the approach that he took. Ray Miller is the next box to the right, the Orioles uniform, the baseball uniform there. He's one of the greatest pitching coaches ever. And he had a real simple motto. It just, whether he was working with a young staff or an old one, and he kept it simple and the same. Work fast, change speeds, throw strikes. And how he got pitchers there is different, but for him, pitching was a mental exercise. It was an attitude that was really critical. But it was a very simple, very direct methodology to get pitchers' minds focused the right way. Then Charlie Lau is in the lower left-hand corner with the Yankees uniforms. He's one of the greatest hitting coaches of all time, and he's famous for Lau's laws on hitting, which focused on a systematic approach that enabled his pupils to solve their own problems and make in-game adjustments. And that was his focus was he couldn't hit for them, so he had to give them the tools to get in the batter's box and succeed themselves. And then there's Jose Mourinho, a current coach. He's the current coach at Chelsea FC, a great, probably the top European soccer club in the world right now. And he has been a really successful coach in 4 different organizations, has won Europe's top title. He is very emotional, very mercurial, really good at tactics and strategy, and links the emotional and physical pieces of games together in interesting ways. So just some interesting coaches to take a look at to get a sense of how different the personalities and approaches can be that lead to success, which again kind of gets back to the point I made earlier. I don't know that, I wish I could tell you there was a one-size-fits-all. I don't think there is. But why is this so important? What is it that we gain if we can get our supervisors, managers, leaders throughout our organization to coach more effectively? Well, there's a study by Burson by Deloitte that says organizations with senior leaders who coach effectively and frequently improve bottom line business results. Now look at that number, 21%. So that's not buying a new process, innovating a new product, changing systems or structures. That's just getting our leaders to understand how to coach to performance more effectively. That is a stunning number to me, and that should be the motivation right there for us. Burson also published this fantastic bit of research. It was based upon interviews with CEOs, and they were asked, what are the major managerial skill gaps you see amongst your mid-level manager population? And there are the 6 in order. Coaching was number 1. performance appraisal, developing others, managing change, communications, and business acumen. And oddly enough, all of those turn out to be critical elements to coaching, but coaching. So it's something that's incredibly important and drives results, and it's a skill gap that CEOs have identified as really important. If you're looking, by the way, Jessica's provided these slides for you. If you're looking for a curriculum, a way to begin to build a curriculum for manager and supervisory development, here it is. There's 6 topics right there that you should think about covering. I love this quote. Eric Parslow, it comes from a book, The Manager as Coach and Mentor. He says, coaching is a process that enables learning and development to occur and thus performance to improve. To be successful, a coach requires a knowledge and understanding of process, as well as the variety of styles, skills, and techniques that are appropriate to the context in which the coaching takes place. Now, it's a little complicated definition or statement about coaching, but it really gets to the heart of the challenge to be a successful coach and why it's so difficult to teach coaching at the manager and supervisory level. Again, it's not a one-size-fits-all, and we'll get into this with the models in just a little while, but I keep this in mind as we go through this. This is a really interesting piece of it. Process as well as style, skills, and techniques. Interesting way to get it. So, which led me to, as we were digging through a way to get at this, I really just did some Google search on sort of, well, what is coaching today? And we found articles that kind of lay out these 4 broad areas. There's business coaching. That's typically what we think of in a manager relationship, sort of coaching in a business setting. Executive coaching is exactly what it sounds like. That's very targeted, specific coaching for senior level executives. But we're seeing 2 other types of coaching. Career coaching really emerge as an extremely prominent aspect of the coaching avocation or profession during the economic downturn of 2008-2009, as millions of Americans were thrust into a situation where they needed help moving their careers forward. So career coaching organizations have sprung up around that, very successful organizations, I might add. And then life coaching. This is the one that we sort of see popping up more and more in the popular literature. So anyway, we're going to focus primarily on the business coaching, though. That's really the piece of this that we need to hone in on. Jessica put this chart together, these next 2 slides, and I'm going to have her help me with these, but on the one axis, the vertical axis, it's about encouragement, the feedback and praise, and on the other axis, the horizontal axis, about empowerment, providing direction and orders, and it comes from a course in our library called Coaching Skills Leadership Styles, done by one of our partners, EJ4, and there are really 4 types of players that this applies to. Rookies, which is exactly what it sounds like, new employees. Contributors, okay, people that are, we're working as individual contributors. Key players, and these are extremely important. These are the folks that are really driving great results. And our captains, people that can work largely without a lot of interference. Jessica, did I explain this chart well?
Yeah, so actually if you go to the next slide here, Chris, you can see that basically it's saying that you want to adapt your leadership style depending on the employee that you're coaching. So again, like Chris said, think of your rookies as, we all had to start somewhere. You're bright-eyed and eager, but you need to be told how to do things. You don't necessarily have those skills. So in that case, it would be, low empowerment and higher encouragement. So, high tell and low praise. So basically you're telling them a lot of what they need to do and not necessarily praising them for anything that they've done successful, because they just don't have the skills yet. Not that you're not going to give them, feedback and stuff, but they're just not there yet. So the contributor, so this employee is starting to do productive work. So the encouragement can be, you've done this well, so that's high tell, high praise. And then the key players, so the employee's starting to understand the job, they're starting to show some success, and they're starting to improve their performance. So that's when you start to really empower them. So there's less telling and more doing and being successful. And those captain, that's where you want a lot of your employees to be. So the employee's working independently. So then that's low tell, low praise. So basically, you let them go and be on their own, and they'll come to you when they need help or encouragement or advice.
Yeah, and I love the order that Jessica presents this in, from rookie to contributor to key player to captain, because that is the journey, the career journey that we want our coaches to take people on. We have to show them how to do their jobs to start with, and that's the focus. And Jessica's exactly right. It's not that you don't provide encouragement and praise, but the focus is on the executions. Then the contributor, just exactly like Jessica described it in the upper right-hand corner, and then we move to key player, where you don't have to tell as much, but you continue to provide that, high level of encouragement, and hopefully we get employees in that low tell, low praise quadrant where they really function very, very well independently. Now, that's not to say, even for our captains, that there aren't elements of empowerment and the critical need for encouragement. That's not what this is trying to talk about. But this just gives you a sense of which aspect along these two axes is more important based upon career phase. Did I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So great stuff. Again, this comes from one of our courses. I love it. So when you start to think about this relationship, this coach-coachee, and by the way, we can't find a better term than coachee, so we're going to use that some today. There are a number of factors that skilled coaches are adept at considering to reach that right level of mix in terms of empowerment, encouragement, and to deliver results. And these are factors that apply to both parties equally to this relationship. What are their personalities like? Are they going to mesh? Are they going to blend? Are they going to clash? That becomes important. What are the learning preferences of both parties? Good coaches learn as much as they teach, and that's something to really keep in mind, that this is about a process of continuous improvement for both parties. The emphasis obviously on coachee, but great coaches will tell you they're learning all the time. What's the distance situation? Are they working in the same location? If they're not, are both parties comfortable with technology? What are the objectives of the relationship? Again, going back to that career stage and what the individual needs. And what are the relative experience of the two parties? Do you have an experienced or inexperienced coach coupled with an experienced or inexperienced employee? All of these factors in various ways, complicated ways sometimes, blend together to help you pinpoint the way to kind of get at this. Which gets us to these models. We mentioned these earlier, and you've probably seen these. There are a bunch of models out there, and there's a lot of things about the models that I like. For instance, all of these models are good at explaining a process, and they've got these neat little acronyms: GROW, goals, reality, options, will, steer, spot the opportunity, tailor the intervention, explain the task, encourage review. But these are process-driven. But the thing about the coaching models that I really love is it really helps us illustrate that coaching can be taught. You can select a process like this, a coaching process, and then begin to build the skills necessary to execute at every step along the way to deliver the kind of results you want. And conversely, that's also the weakness of the coaching models. They are totally process-focused, and they don't really help us understand the skills necessary to execute at each step along the way. And that ultimately is where a lot of the coaching models, when all we're doing is explaining a model to people, that's frequently why those relationships don't succeed the way we want them to, is because we focus on the model itself, the process, but not the techniques. Remember that quote from Parslow? Coaching is a blend of process and the techniques and skills necessary to deliver the coaching that's appropriate to the circumstances. All of those things are really, get right into that. So again, here's sort of the strengths of the coaching models. They're very, very good. All of them are good at helping the coach assess current performance. They're great at identifying gaps or areas for improvement. They do help the parties develop a plan to close gaps or improve performance, and they, largely help explain the process piece of delivery and action on the plan. Jessica, we have a question coming. Is this a good time to take it, or should I keep going?
Yeah, it was actually a comment from Barbara. She said this looks like, when referring to the model that you showed earlier, it looks like situational leadership with different words. They use relationship and task versus encouragement and empowerment. So you're just making a comment on the model that you showed earlier. I do have a question though, also related to coaching models. So is a coaching typically is a coaching model, so if you go to the slide previous, is that chosen by the coach, so the manager or the leader, or should be something that is consistent across your organization?
Well, great question. And I think most organizations pick a methodology to train to and teach to, so that the coaching relationships and conversations have some consistency, so that when people are talking about where employees are stuck or what they're working on, everybody's got a common frame of reference for it. So typically speaking, the models tend to be selected across an organization. However, what we're going to get to when we dive into this next pieces of it, which kind of ties into what Barbara identified, it is very situational. And it's not exactly leadership. There's a different focus with coaching, but because it's much more one-on-one interactive kind of thing. But you have to understand both the process and the techniques to get to it. So the process, in my mind, becomes less important than understanding the core skills necessary, and that's the shortfall of the models, is they don't focus on that. So this is a great definition that I wanted to propose for us to consider for the rest of today's webinar, or just mull this around, see what you think of it. Coaching is building one-on-one relationships and managing a process that result in specific improved performance in targeted areas. So to the comment about, well, it looks like situational leadership, it is similar, but the focus is different, and that's why I wanted to get to this definition quickly. This is one-on-one relationships around a process targeted to improved performance. All right, so with that in mind, let's begin to piece together the critical elements of successful coaching relationships and all of the other pieces that go along with it. It's about relationships, it's about process with a targeted of improved performance. That ultimately is what we're trying to drive at to get to success. So today's coaches must be multifunctional and be equally competent as a manager, tactician, trainer, psychologist, physiologist, and sometimes even a counselor. You simply cannot coach the same way as you did 10, 15, or 20 years ago for a number of reasons. It's from Gary Kearney. He's a professional blogger, professional coach and blogger. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's just, this is a piece of the work world that has changed so much. And it's not necessarily good or bad changes. It's just the reality that our workplaces are different. And we have to really focus on being adaptable. Now, at any given time, our managers have to function along a continuum, if you think about it, with supervision and compliance on one end, that is, dot I's, cross T's, to achievement of goals, which is a more strategic function, which pulls into leadership in many ways. But we're operating along that continuum almost all of the time. Conversations with employees, different places. So it's the trick, the art to coaching, is understanding the techniques, the skills, the things that you have to be able to do professionally in order to move that process forward, depending upon where you are in this continuum, depending upon what piece of the puzzle we're trying to improve. Is our improved performance around strictly compliance? We've got to get people on board to follow these processes. Or is it, hey, we're not quite performing at the level we need to perform, it's a different challenge. So that's the piece of this that gets really important. And I think one of the things that we forget, and this is where the models, I think, aren't always as helpful as I'd like for them to be, is they don't always take into account the relationship from the perspective of the employee being coached. And that is, I think, a missing piece to a lot of the literature that I find out there. We talk about, well, the coach has to do this, coach has to do that, and which is great. In fact, I was given a book at our conference called Leading with the Heart, Coach K's Successful Strategies for Basketball, Business, and Life by Mike Krzyzewski. And that's what that's about. It's the coach's perspective. Here's my country, here's my approach to things. So it's from an employee's perspective, we want to have, a positive approach with a future orientation as it's a two-way communication thing. Again, a relationship where the coach listens more than talks, okay? But everybody's got to be committed to making it work. The coach must be heavily invested in the success of the employee, and the employee must understand that commitment to continuous learning by both parties and a strong desire for improvement. So that's what a relationship should look like from the employee's perspective. So, model aside, this is what we should be looking for in our coaches. These are the things that we need to be building and encouraging, regardless of the model we choose. There are traits that are really important. We need people that are positive, future-oriented, and curious. Again, going back to that continuous learning piece, we need skills. There are certain skills necessary for really great coaches. In today's work world, collaboration becomes extremely important, learning how to facilitate learning, but to be an educator and teacher at the same time. So those blended together have a pretty powerful impact. And then think of the behaviors that we want to see exhibited by successful coaches. They're continuous learners. They have an outward focus. Their success in their mind is measured by the success of the people around them. They're active and engaged listeners. Now, I said I was going to challenge you or ask you a question. Think about great coaches that you've run into, observed, or had, hopefully, over the course of your career, and measure your experience with them across these three areas. Were these traits present in some capacity? Were these skills there? There are probably other skills too, but were those skills there? And did they exhibit those behaviors? Odds are pretty good that they did on some level. All right, Jessica, I'm going to are there any other questions, or do I need to keep going here?
Yeah, there's a question in from Tanya. So she asked, how do you balance, so looking under the skills, how do you balance the skills of learning facilitator versus educator facilitator?
Well, that's a great question, but it has to do with the specific targeted improvement in the moment. So if we are working with a new employee, a rookie, so to speak, we're going to be focused more on the role of educator-teacher. Here are HR fundamentals. Okay, you're a brand new HR generalist in this organization, so here's some fundamentals that I need to make sure you understand. As the employee gains confidence and gains skill, they're going to do a lot of learning on their own, a lot of learning through social interaction, a lot of learning from different resources, and that's where we have to be able to step aside and facilitate the ongoing learning. So that's how I would think about those. Was that a good answer, Jessica?
It was. Yep. Thanks. Good question too.
Yeah, it was. Okay, so your coach's toolkit. All right. So again, regardless of the model, these are the tools that you want to make sure you arm your coaches with. Good training on communications. We'll talk about what that looks like in a minute. Performance management, business acumen, and emotional intelligence. If you arm your coaches with this toolkit, you're setting yourself and them up to be very successful. So let's explore each of these in one at a time. The communication piece of it. The key skills, and by the way, Jessica mentioned that I was an attorney by training, so I don't always do as well at this as I'd like, but once in a while we get word choice correct. And this is a situation where I think we did. These key skills are in order for a reason. Active listening. Our coaches need to really understand clearly what's going on with the employees, which requires active, engaged listening, and this is a skill that can be taught. Learning to frame and ask effective questions. Again, you can't get good answers unless you ask good questions first. And then courageous conversations. Sometimes we just have to tell people uncomfortable truths and deliver bad news. As a coach, sometimes we have to do that. So here are the behaviors. Identify obstacles to success, find solutions, establish agreed upon definitions of success and a plan of action, and then all this is hopefully aimed at gaining commitment and engagement from both parties. So that, in a nutshell, is your communications aspect to this. So we talked about good questions. We're going to tip you with some here. Here are 3 questions every manager should ask themselves about their employee. Does the employee have the capacity to perform in their current role? Do they have the capacity to grow into more effective or more complex future roles? Is the employee curious? I find that trait over and over again in high-performing employees. Are they curious? Do they want to learn more? Do they need to know more? And does the employee have a positive attitude? If you have those 3 elements in your employees, you're in pretty good shape. And if the answer to any of these questions is no, from the manager's perspective, how can I build this? How can I foster that behavior? How can I encourage my employees to be more curious, for instance? Can I show them why it's important? All right, so the second of the 4 critical tools in the toolkit is performance management. And what I'm talking about here is not performance reviews. This is management of performance with a goal of improving performance. That's the trick. That's the trick. So what is it that you have to be able to do well? Here are the skills. Got to understand what actually drives employee engagement and motivation, and there's some great data, some fabulous thought leadership in this area floating around out there. Be able to set effective goals, and this isn't just being able to articulate a goal and say, here's what we're going to do, or dictating goals. I'm talking about true goal setting, where the goals are attainable but challenging, where they're smart, where they're wise, they're wisely chosen, so you're encouraging effective decision-making and not encouraging unnecessary risk-taking, and the ability to delegate. We have to delegate. We have to let people go in order for them to succeed. So here are what you're going to get out of this. You're going to identify strengths and weaknesses, outline goals and objectives so you have something to aim for, right? Understand how to prioritize and capitalize on employee strengths. This becomes extremely important for engagement and motivation. Employees work far more effectively when they're working in areas of strength. And again, the ultimate objective is to improve performance in those targeted areas. With each generation entering the workplace, a greater emphasis is placed on continual development, as these new employees know that they're unlikely to stay more than a few years. It's about what they can develop and acquire to take the next stop in the career journey. And we know that effective leaders are one of the most important influences on levels of engagement. This is from Rebecca Ray, a conference, Employee Engagement in a VUCA World. And it really is a great advertisement for the reason to do development. Employees thrive when they're given development opportunities. Employees thrive when their coaches understand how to actually coach them to higher levels of performance. It absolutely works. And if we're determined to hang on to key employees, this becomes really important. There's a funny joke going around. I've posted this cartoon at LinkedIn a couple of times where you got a CEO and CFO standing there and talking, and the CFO, asks the question, well, what happens if we train them and they leave? And the CEO replies, well, what if we don't train them and they stay? And that's kind of the corollary to what Rebecca Ray is saying there. So then the third of the 4 elements of the toolkit is business acumen. And this is a bit of content that I don't think many organizations spend any time on, and we typically just sort of expect employees to pick this up through the course of experience and through the sheer dint of, the work world and things that they have to do. And unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. One of the challenges that we've faced here at Biz Library, I'm going to speak about our organization for just a moment and the challenges that we have. And, maybe they apply to you, maybe they don't, but we have a lot of really bright young people here. A lot of millennials, a few Gen Xers, there's a couple of old fogies like me floating around too. But these bright young people are coming to us, eager to be successful, motivated, energetic. They're wanting everything right now. I mean, you got to give me that promotion, give me that big project. And this gets back to the courageous conversations piece of it. Sometimes they're not ready. And sometimes they're not ready through no fault of their own. So we need to make sure that we build in these employees. Every employee in the organization can use a greater sense of business acumen. And it's become extremely important for our coaches if the objective, the agreed upon objective, is improved performance in targeted areas. So the key skills associated with business acumen is an understanding, a thorough understanding of broad-based business principles related to operations and functions. Now, you don't have to be an accountant or a finance major to understand business finance, but you should know what a spreadsheet and a balance sheet is. You should know what the difference between those things are. You should at least understand at a high level, at a strategic level, what professionals that work in that area do. You should understand business operations at a high level, logistics, HR at a high level, sales and marketing at very, very high levels. You don't have to dive into the details. You don't need to know everything that your sales team does or your marketing team does or your operations team, but it's helpful to have a good understanding of how businesses operate, how they function, how they, what separates profitable from unprofitable businesses. It's really important to create a framework around this for making decisions. That becomes a really, really key part of business acumen, being able to make effective and smart decisions, which is built upon a lot of industry knowledge. So here's what we're looking for. We're looking for a professional level of understanding amongst our coaches. This is really important to be able to identify for employees as they're moving through their career and trying to improve who are the influencers and key stakeholders within our organization or outside that can help move them to the next level in their career, help build their skills, and to be able to explain very clearly how businesses make decisions, sometimes good, sometimes bad. Jessica, do we have questions?
I have two questions and then a piggyback on one question. So first question is from Barbara, related to business acumen. So when you're referring to accounting terms, do you think things like operating ratio are critical for our coaches to know, or what do you mean by accounting terms?
Well, I apologize if I misspoke. I'm not trying to say that we need to teach, get down into the weeds on a lot of accounting terms. I just think step it up one level above there. And at a strategic level, just to be able to explain to people, in general, Jessica, this is what a financial professionals do in an organization. They will, make decisions or help us make decisions about how much to capitalize, how much we can borrow. They'll help us balance costs and pricing and overhead, and they'll help manage the financial aspects of the organization. So a CFO is very involved in a whole range of financial decisions, ranging from investments to tax planning, payroll planning, that all of those functions in many ways roll up under finance. That's what I was talking about. And I think just at a really, really foundational level, understanding the difference between a balance sheet and a P&L statement is probably helpful. It begins to let people begin to see how some of that stuff works. But I don't think you need to get into, EBITDA or, real specific, complex accounting terms. I don't think that's quite necessary. So I hope that's a good answer.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so many of our employees are moving into roles that are much more specialized. So a lot of organizations are moving in that direction. So just having a high-level overview about how a business functions and what makes a typical business successful can sometimes be overlooked because you're like, oh, how can someone not know that? But you'd be surprised. Not everyone knows these things. So I mean, it is something that, if you start to coach that or to help the employee learn about the organization and how businesses function, and they obviously know already, you can move forward. But then what can you add to it? Maybe it's a deeper industry knowledge, or maybe it's more knowledge about their specialized role. All right, so on to the question from Sharon. So she asks, how do you motivate employees that are not interested in professional development and only see it as a 9-to-5 job? And then to piggyback onto this from Sarah is, especially when you specifically ask, what can I do to help make your job easier, to help you and grow and gain knowledge?
Well, motivation is a tricky and complicated facet of the work world that we do when we're working with other people. We have many people that come to us that are sort of innately motivated. They're just go-getters. They're up, they're pounding away. Other people, a little slow to get going on some things. sometimes we can influence that, sometimes we can't. But at a foundational level, what we need to be able to do is to explain to employees why participation in this activity, training, development, will make their life better at work. If you learn to do this better, you're going to be in line for promotion down the road and you're going to make more money. You know, it's bottom line. Or you can increase your bonus capability, whatever it is. But that old-fashioned what's in it for me becomes extremely important. We really have to really dive in and begin to get employees to see for themselves why they should participate with you. And if they don't get it, you know, that old thing from Jim Collins, you know, you want to get the right people on the bus. Maybe they are, maybe they're not the right person for your bus. You may have roles in the organization where that approach to work is going to work really, really well, but you're probably going to have a lot more roles in your organization where that is not a desired behavior. Jessica, I wanted to point out two other functions real quickly, and if you stop and think about business acumen with this here, where a lack of business acumen can really get in the way of success: sales and customer service. It is impossible to be an effective salesperson if you don't understand at a high level how the companies you're talking to function and make money. It's very difficult to provide effective professional level customer service if you don't, in a business-to-business environment, if you don't understand what your client businesses do to make money. It's hard to understand their business challenges and business problems. Therefore, it's harder to solve them. So business acumen training has a very real application to organizations and can definitely impact the bottom line. All right, so the fourth of our 4 toolkits, I'm going to quickly go over them. Communication, we talked about that. Performance management, business acumen, and now we save the hardest one for last, emotional intelligence. This is another area where I think organizations, and this has been definitely true in my experience, organizations do not pay enough attention to this area for either development or recognizing how important it is. But there's some fantastic published information out there that says that ultimately our level of emotional intelligence is the single most important factor to lifelong business success. No other factor got there, gets that level of impact. So here are the key skills. There's 2 critical ones: self-awareness, being motivated, and regulation. So understanding sort of how you fit into environments and how you are impacting situations, the ability to build effective relationships. And so here are the 3 things we need to see. We want to be able to guide employees through workplace conflicts and difficult situations. That's a key part of great coaching. Adaptability in a fast-changing work world. Emotional intelligence is going to make that so much easier to work with. And last but not least is a positive response to diversity in thought and culture, particularly in this work world. Okay, Jessica, anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I think it's a critical component, whether it's a new manager, whether it's a mid-level manager, whether it's a more senior manager. Emotional intelligence, more and more of our employees are working remotely, or we have less face time with employees. So having an awareness of ourselves and how we relate to other people is growing in importance. So couldn't agree more.
Yeah, again, like I said, I believe this to be true. If you think about the most successful people that you run into in any walk of life, they typically exhibit high degrees of emotional intelligence. I mean, it turns out to be super, super important. So I wanted to spend just a second to talk about the distinction between coaching and mentoring, because these terms are frequently used interchangeably. They shouldn't be. From my perspective, again, having done coaching, executive coaching, a lot of coaching over the course of my career, and also having done some mentoring, I see these as 2 very different things, two different types of relationships. So again, Eric, going back to Eric Parslow's quote about the manager's coach, the coach requires knowledge and understanding of processes as well as styles, but it's really about a context in which the coaching is taking place. Application of those elements to drive very specific results. Mentoring is an offline help by one person to another in making significant transitions in knowledge, work, or thinking. This is from Clutterbuck and Mingenson on mentoring executives and directors. And I think that's a really interesting way to get at this. So anyway, that's just a fascinating way to look at that distinction. So here are the key takeaways that we want to leave you with today, and we've got some really good questions being posed here, so I want to make sure we have plenty of time for these. Coaching is a relationship, but it's based on communication and commitment to improvement. Coaching is a skill that should be developed and adapted based on the employees being coached, and we can teach coaching. We can absolutely teach people to do it. And great coaches share key traits, skills, and behaviors, and we can improve the coaching skills of our managers through training and development. So I think there's a lot of very encouraging information out of this space to kind of take in. Jessica, I'm going to mute myself and get a quick drink, let you take over for a couple of seconds, and then we'll jump in and deal with all these really great questions that I see.
Sounds good, Chris. So again, continue to pose the questions in the question box on the right-hand side of your screen. I have some recommended resources for today's attendees, mostly based on some of the key things that we included in the coaching toolbox. So these are all video courses. The first one is on active listening. So it's a series that'll help your managers and employees develop active listening skills. This one on the right, this is one of my favorites called Great Managers Help People Hone Their Strengths. Another recommend, it's 2 minutes in length, but it's really focused on taking action. So it's another one that I'd recommend. Bottom left corner, check your 6 practical measures of workplace success. And this last one on the far right is a 6-course series on emotional intelligence. So it takes you through what is emotional intelligence, developing self-awareness, developing self-motivation, developing self-regulation, developing effective relationships, and developing empathy. So these courses and more, they're all included in the Biz Library collection. There's more than 7,000 courses, so that includes both video courses and more traditional e-learning courses. Covers more than 25 different topic areas, and it's set up to where employees get unlimited access. So if you want to try out any of the courses in the course series that I recommended in today's webinar, you're welcome to do so. You can do a free 30-day trial, try out those courses as well as any of the others. So I'll put up a quick poll and just let me know if you'd like to try them out. All right, Chris, lots of great questions that came in. So this first one is from Stephen. So he asked, everything is really interesting, but it seems very theoretical. So anything that you can provide about how these skills can be developed?
Yeah, Stephen, that gets right to the heart of what we work hard to do. I want to provide you with some real takeaways. And the thing to focus on is get the slides and look at that coach's toolkit. That'll lay out for you at a high level key competency areas that you can teach in development. Communication. Focus on those 3 elements to that. Teach active and effective listening. Teach people how to have courageous conversations. In terms of performance management, make sure your managers understand the difference between engagement and motivation and how they can spark engagement in their employees and why it's important to play to employees' strengths. In terms of business acumen, you can definitely teach that. It's extremely important to give people a foundation on how businesses operate. And emotional intelligence, as critically important as that is, a lot of folks kind of default to the idea, well, some people are born with it or you're not, and that's not really true. We can teach higher degrees of awareness and a way to function in situations where we can do things. So Stephen, the idea behind all of those slides following that 4-square thing with the coach's toolkit was to give you a specific targeted curriculum that you can begin to work with. And by the way, we have content in our library. Jessica's got the trial up for you now that will help in each one of those areas. So yeah, absolutely. I think the theory is great, but there is a practical aspect to this too.
And I'd also add that, so I recommended some courses, a few slides ago, but not only in the courses that I recommended, but a lot of them also come with facilitators guides and PowerPoint. So if you want to use, maybe I'll use the video to set kind of the foundational knowledge for it. But then you have some other support resources that you can use if you want to do like a group discussion or a group training class along with that video that are really targeted around emotional intelligence. How do you teach someone emotional intelligence? So to help you lay that out. And like Chris said, a lot of what we included in that toolkit is to help you understand what should be included in the curriculum. That next step is to align the different training resources and content that will help your employees learn that. All right, next question is from Alexandra. So does the coaching toolkit translate well across cultures?
Yes, absolutely. Alexandra, in my experience, Jessica mentioned I work for a Paris-based consulting firm. I did international coaching for high-performance employees and some executive coaching, and I will tell you that I relied upon a toolkit sort of that really is from very, very many years of intense personal experience. There are different takes and shadings on pieces of it that you have to make sure are culturally appropriate and recognizable within the culture. But yes, those 4 elements do apply across cultures. Communication skills, performance management, business acumen, emotional intelligence. Absolutely. That toolkit applies across cultures. That they do have to be adapted a little bit, but that does work.
All right, next question is from Charles. He asked, could you discuss the difference between coaching and counseling?
Well, counseling is frequently a subset of coaching, okay? Coaching is a little broader relationship. It's really, working with an employee in all aspects of their work world aimed at improvement in a targeted area, okay? Counseling really applies in trouble situations where you have to pull somebody aside and counsel them through a conflict or some emotional outburst or something else. It's more targeted, and it typically focuses on usually a negative event or negative circumstances. Coaching, going back to what we talked about earlier, it's positive, it's forward-looking, it's not remedial. Counseling is about remediation, some sort of remedial action taken to improve an attitude or address a specific performance issue. Coaching is a different kind of relationship. So I hope that explains it a little bit better, but think of coaching as more of a strategic, future-looking relationship, and counseling more as a short-term intervention kind of thing.
All right, good question. This next one comes from Lisa. So do you recommend that HR sit in with managers on difficult conversations or leave them to handle it alone and then follow up after?
Well, I'm chuckling to myself. In my experience both in HR and as a lawyer that worked in this area, I've seen it work well and be disasters both ways. My opinion, my professional opinion, is that your most experienced managers are usually going to be adept at having the difficult conversations one-on-one, particularly if they have the kind of trusting relationship with the employee necessary to make those conversations effective. Your less experienced managers probably need help with those situations. So my recommendation is it's a little of both, depending upon the situation and depending upon just how difficult the conversation is going to be. I never have recommended sort of counseling, sort of remediation conversations in a purely one-on-one. It's typically important to have a couple of people present so there can be no misunderstanding about what's going on and what we're trying to accomplish. Difficult coaching decisions like, Chris, I know you want to be the VP of marketing, but we see you going in a different direction. We see you taking over our digital marketing, but somebody else having strategic control of the whole marketing function, for instance. I wouldn't want to hear that. That would be a difficult conversation, but that would work best in a relationship, one-on-one conversation when I've got that trust and that, I know that the coach, I believe in the coach. I believe in the coach's commitment to me. So that would be how I would distinguish those two situations.
All right, great questions today. I'll go ahead and wrap up, for those of you that are attending for HRCI credit, I put a link in the chat panel. I'll also send out a follow-up email that'll include a link to the completion certificate. So you should expect that in your inbox around 4 p.m. Central Time today. Upcoming webinars, we do these webinars every week. They're all pre-approved by HRCI for general continuing education credit. So this week's webinar, this Thursday, is on the 3 B's of a content development strategy. So that includes build, borrow, and buy. And then the following week, how to create a competency-based training program. So all of our upcoming webinars are on our website at bizlibrary.com/webinars. So again, thank you so much for all the great questions today. Thank you for attending with us. And thank you, Chris, for presenting.
Yes, thanks everybody for attending. Love the questions and hope to see you on a webinar again in the future.